Welcome back to Real Estate Mindset. Today's video is going to be absolutely bonkers. Now, the data is in, and today what we're going to do is talk about what would happen if the federal government postpones increasing the debt ceiling. Because the reality of the situation is, if any political games happen, if they postpone raising the debt ceiling, that is going to wreak havoc on our economy and our housing market, even if it's just for one day. So what we're going to do, guys, is we're going to dig into a Zillow article. We're going to kind of break down what it would look like if the government does default on their debt and how that would affect the housing market. Now, on top of that, I'm also going to go into other things like unemployment, and I'm going to bring up a chart, and I'm going to show you how closely unemployment actually tracks mortgage delinquencies. And what do we have record low right now, you guys? We have record low unemployment and we have record low mortgage delinquencies, except in FHA mortgages, which are at 10% for the last 4 months, bringing us back to 2013. But that's on FHA. I want to talk about the entire market. And here's the reality of the situation. We need to stop our own federal government from spending money. They're doing quantitative easing right now for the elites and quantitative tightening for the consumers. Change my mind. Change my mind, you guys. How are they not doing that? They just bailed out the banks, and yet the consumers like me, like you, are suffering on the sidelines because we can't afford anything. And not only can we not afford anything, most people, their savings, their excess savings is being depleted and their debt obligations are exploding. So in other words, there are so many red flags right now when it pertains to the health of the consumer and the health of the economy and housing market. Please remember, I'm not a financial advisor. I'm just a normal person, even though my bio is as a realtor, loan officer, instructor in real estate in Texas. And I am answering my email. If you have any questions, shoot me an email. But regardless, you guys, like this video for me. Please, you guys, help me grow my channel. There's something wrong with YouTube. If you guys can like this video, comment on it, hit notifications, share it, I would greatly appreciate that. But regardless, we're going to start on a Zillow article titled, "A debt ceiling default would send the U.S. housing market back into deep freeze." I like how Zillow's acknowledging these things now that prices have kind of rebounded. They're like, oh yeah, the house prices were crashing, right? They're saying that now, but during the actual price crashes, y'all, where were they? Where were they? They were nowhere to be found. And they go on to say a debt default is very unlikely, but new scenario projections from Zillow show sales would decrease sharply as mortgage costs balloon. All right, Zillow, you have my attention. Let's go on. 3 bullet points that this article is really going to cover. The fact that home sales volume would likely decline sharply because everyone would be freaking out, and their assets, like if they have T-bills, Social Security, right, that would all be hampered. Now, they're also going on to say home values could be 5% lower than their baseline. So they're saying that if the government goes into default, values will drop 5%. Only if they go into default. Like, what? Okay. All right, Zillow. I'm not, okay. We'll let Zillow do their thing. Let's move on. Much uncertainty surrounds these estimates, but there's little doubt that a default would be a major negative shock to housing market activity. The U.S. federal government is inching closer to a potential default on national debt since at the time of this note's publication. Congress still has not passed legislation raising the statutory debt ceiling. The X date, the date on which the Treasury can no longer meet its obligations without raising debt in excess of the ceiling, is projected to land as early, you guys listen, as early as June. That's in 3 weeks. That's in less than 3 weeks. That's crazy. But almost certainly by August, depending on the flow of income tax receipts this spring. And I'm just sitting back thinking like, man, this is what, 2023? We have like AI now. We have all these programs. How do they not know this? How can we not target more specific dates? What? You know what? Maybe it's because they plan on doing more money printing. I hope not, right? That would be very bad, I believe. But what's with the lack of transparency, y'all? Right? What's with the lack of transparency? I hate it. The U.S. has never before defaulted on its sovereign debt, and it is difficult to find historical analogies to such an event. Nevertheless, in order to highlight the importance of averting such a self-inflicted disaster, economic forecasters have attempted to model the impact on the economy if it were to come to pass. In this brief, we sketch out one potential scenario on what would happen to the housing market with the default. So they're going to do the best they can to project this, y'all, but I'm going to tell you guys right now, as always, Zillow is being conservative and overly optimistic, not even accounting for a recession. And literally, guys, everything right now is telling us we're going into recession, like all of the economic indicators, like it's 100% chance. In fact, if we don't go into recession, it will be an insane anomaly that has never, ever before happened. Why wouldn't I bet with history here? What do I want to bet with the greedy investors, or do I want to bet with history that has wiped out so many investors along the way? When we forecast the evolution of the housing market over the next 18 months in the event of such a default. So they're going to go over 18 months, and they also estimate home sales would fall as much as 23% relative to their baseline forecast. And again, homes would drop 5% in addition at the end of 2024. Rising interest rates. If the US were to enter default in the coming months, one near certain consequence would be rising debt yields and interest rates. US Treasury bills, T-bills, provide some of the bedrock and benchmarks for risk-free assets on which the economy and most financial models depend. Introducing default risk, or at least the risk of delayed coupon payments, would be like an earthquake rattling the bedrock assumption, sending ripples through the financial system and causing investors to question the safety not just of T-bills, but also other assets as well. Critical for the housing market. The interest rates on mortgages would almost certainly rise in return. So what they're saying here, guys, and they're estimating that interest rates would go to approximately 8% if they defaulted. And honestly, guys, I think that this right here, because we understand, consumer sentiment is so strong, something like that would absolutely break consumer sentiment. So if they go into default, they're expecting about 8% interest rates. But I'm also saying another powerful tool on that they're really not mentioning is how scared people will be, right? People will be scared. Where do I put my money? If I can't even put it in treasury bills, where do I put my money? Do y'all see what I'm saying? People will panic, and that's a fact. Now let's go into unemployment. The unemployment rate is also expected to rise substantially in the event of a debt default. And now after I'm reading this, you guys, I'm going to show you the relationship between unemployment and mortgage delinquency. And I think you guys are going to be blown away how closely they track together. The unemployment rate is also expected to rise substantially in the event of a debt default. Federal government expenditures directly account for a large share of economic activity, of course, because the government keeps spending their money. That's what I'm saying. We need the government to stop spending money, right? It's almost like children. I don't understand this. Federal expenditures alone accounted for 34% of GDP in the first quarter of 2023. You guys think that the government is propping up the economy and the housing market? It's a rhetorical question. I'll move on. Hitting the debt limit would mean the federal government can only spend as much revenue as it receives each month. When I read this, I'm like, huh? They're not doing that. They're printing money and they're still not spending what they make each month, and they have the ability to print. Like how? Like this is like how to not get in trouble 101, right? Don't spend more than you have. And I understand that our economy is a debt economy and that's how things work. But nevertheless, holy smokes, if you're a child and you're listening to this, y'all, children, do not spend more money than you have. In fact, spend way less money than what you have so that you can get ahead in life. Hitting the debt limit would mean the federal government can only spend as much revenue as it receives as much, no longer able to issue debt to finance the running deficit. The federal deficit was over 1.3 trillion in fiscal year 2022. Insane. If the 2023 budget shortfall is similar, then spending would need to be slashed by approximately that amount, more than 1 trillion on an annualized basis. So to me, when I'm reading this, you guys, I'm like, oh my gosh, are you serious? We need to cut $1 trillion in spending per year. I can tell you guys right now, that's not gonna happen, right? Or comment below, let me know if you guys think that the federal government has the ability, just the ability to spend $1 trillion less annualized. Do y'all think that's even possible? I don't know, you guys. I don't think that's possible. Such a large reduction of spending would cause furloughs among federal and state employees or layoffs at the federal government and likely trigger wave of layoffs as contractors and other employees more indirectly connected to federal spending. The logic of a recession beginning might become self-fulfilling as consumers and investor confidence fall amid market turmoil. The reality is, if they don't extend the debt ceiling, they can't even pay their own employees. Think about that, right? Obviously, that's going to start a lot of panic in the industry. Essentially, this is what they're saying. As a result of the debt ceiling, interest rates would go over 8%. Y'all see that here? And it would go over 8% and then kind of start going down towards the end of 2023. But still, towards the end of the year, still at about 7%. So that's what Zillow's saying. That's what I was telling you guys earlier. But again, they expect, if that happens, interest rates to be slightly over 6% by the end of 2024. So here it is right here, 8.4%. So mortgage rates are assumed to rise at a peak of 8.4%. And that would be helpful to our housing market. Let's be honest. The resulting economic scenario is sketched out below. A sharp increase in the unemployment rate starting this summer. So if that happens, massive unemployment starting this summer from state, federal, contract, all over the place. Now, jumping from the current level of 3.4 to a peak of 8.3% in October. So they're saying we would more than double our unemployment by October. So y'all see what I'm saying here? We need the government to stop spending money so that our economy and our housing market can properly heal, because what's happening right now, they're just making it worse, putting band-aids on bullet holes. We need to return back to balance, and we need to return back to fundamentals. And it's really a shame that as consumers, we're not united enough to say, as consumers, let's break on the housing market for 1 year. And let's let it heal so that in 1 year from now, we can all get a better deal, right? But it's a dog-eat-dog world, and it is what it is. Let me go back and show you this. If that happens, unemployment rate would shoot up. And if unemployment rate shoots up, and I'll show you a chart here in a minute, obviously mortgage delinquencies will follow, causing more forced selling in our housing market. And it would also be a return to falling home values. And I love how Zillow's finally acknowledging this, right? It's a return to falling values because values did fall, just not at the end of 2021 like they thought it would, and they lost hundreds of millions of dollars as a result. So basically they're saying 23% decline in housing market activity, and it would go from 4.3 million sales down to 3.3 million sales in September. And here's a chart of what they think that would look like. Obviously straight down and then gradually back up. So to me, when I'm looking at this, y'all, I'm like, yeah, let's not extend the debt ceiling. I don't know how else to say this. I think that's exactly what we need. Let's be honest, guys. We're not in this situation necessarily because of us. We're in this situation because of the federal government, right? The quantitative easing made this mess. The quantitative tightening is an attempt to get us out of this mess. But again, quantitative tightening for the consumers. We're experiencing quantitative easing right now for the elites. Again, changed my mind. That's exactly what I see right here. If there's someone in the government, stop them from raising the debt ceiling because they're counteracting the Federal Reserve's fight against inflation. Do y'all agree? Comment below. Maybe I'm wrong here. I'm not a smart person. I know that, but do me a favor, you guys. Just comment what they're saying decline will look like. That's the orange line right here. So they're saying decline would happen probably into the first half of 2024. So again, you guys, I'm looking at this. I'm like, yes, this is everything that we need. This is what I've been waiting for, which means if it wasn't for the government overspending, we probably continue to be on our way of rebalancing this housing market. Now, this goes on. However, if unemployment really rises by as much as we assumed here, that could force many homeowners unable to pay their mortgage to sell, putting more downward pressure on home values than predicted here. So they're predicting it, yet they're not taking it into consideration with home value decline. So that makes absolutely no sense to me. So Zillow, what they should have done is what would home values do with that type of unemployment, right? With that type of mortgage delinquency. Really, really crazy stuff here, you guys. It's mentioning here there's a lot less affordability to buyers. That's absolutely true. Unaffordability is ravaging the housing market right now. Pretty much everyone understands it at this point. Now let's read the bottom line here. The bottom line, a debt default would mean major disruption for the housing market. The exact repercussions of a debt default scenario this summer is unclear, but also unimportant for the conclusion about its impact on the housing market. Any major disruption to the economy and debt markets will have major repercussions to the housing market, and we have so many boots that haven't even fallen right now. So any of those boots fall right now, major repercussions for the housing market, and people just want to go buy when we have red flags everywhere. Insane. Chilling sales and rising borrowing costs just when the market was beginning to stabilize and recover from the major cool down of late 2022. Look at their wording. Like, look at how Zillow just flip-flops and just navigates like very carefully through this. This is insane. Like the impact to labor markets, the housing market fallout would represent an unnecessary own goal at an inopportune moment when macroeconomic policymakers already have their hands full attempting to cool down inflation without tipping the economy into recession. When we look at the inversion of the yields, everything is telling us recession, but the market is still saying, man, not this time, not this time, which is one of the most dangerous things to say as an investor. So the fact it's now like a household, like saying, not this time, right? It's not going to happen this time. Consumers need to stop watching the media. That's all I'm saying. They need to stop and they need to start like meditating and like really thinking like, what should I do next? But let me show you guys this. Let's take a look at unemployment. So I want to make a point here. Unemployment has gone down to 3.4%. That is astonishingly low, you guys. And I also want to make a point that we started quantitative tightening in March of 2022. When we started quantitative tightening, as you guys can see here, the unemployment rate was 3.6%. So after quantitative tightening, the unemployment rate has gone down 0.2%, according to these numbers. So here's the reality of this situation, you guys. I think that they're covering up the reality of the labor market. In fact, I believe that the government is propping up the labor market by making a lot of government jobs. And without those government jobs, I think we would really see the reality of the situation, plus how they count it, which means this: we may be in a much worse situation than it actually tells us, because what do we see after every turn on the internet? Layoffs somewhere. Layoffs are absolutely spiking, but not with government jobs. So again, I believe the government is propping it up, but once we see that unemployment skyrocket, obviously that is going to create a massive impact in the housing market, and it's also going to create a massive impact in the mortgage delinquency department. So let me show you guys now, and this is very, very intriguing. Let me show you guys how closely that unemployment tracks mortgage delinquencies, because when I saw this, you guys, I was blown away. Take a look at this. This is the Mortgage Bankers Association chart of the week. This is measuring mortgage delinquency rate, comparing it to the unemployment rate. This is really, really cool. Now, the gold line or orange line represents unemployment. The blue line represents delinquencies. And you can really see how closely this started tracking right here in 2000. When unemployment goes up, so does the delinquency. When unemployment goes down, so does the delinquency. And we can really see this back in 2006. They both skyrocketed up together. And look at this, you guys, around 2010, they both went down together. And then back in 2019, again, they both went up together. Back in 2021, they both went down together. I personally didn't know how closely these two things tracked each other. Are you guys surprised by this? I'm actually really, really surprised. So it stands to reason, all right, that if we do enter into recession, which I'm saying we may be in recession right now, and we probably are in recession right now. But once we have our confirmed recession, what's needed for that? Unemployment. Once we have all of those things, you guys, that's additional boots that will hit the ground that will absolutely affect the housing market and other areas of the economy, such as home ownership. When unemployment goes up, obviously defaults and delinquencies explode. Now, in conclusion, as much as I would like the government to battle it out, to fix the problems, I think it's a long shot. Now, if it does happen, and if you're on the sideline like me, this can be an absolutely great thing to happen to, again, it will cause pain at first, it will cause unemployment, but those are temporary things, right? What we don't want is a permanent, unbalanced, unaffordable housing market. So we have to go through a period of pain. Obviously, by the government not increasing the debt ceiling, that will take us to where we want to go much faster. But the reality is in my opinion, we have a lot of weak officials. Everyone's arguing. Who knows what's going to happen? Now, do I want that to happen? Yes, I absolutely do. Do I think it's going to happen, you guys? I don't think it's going to happen, but only time will tell. And other than that, you guys do me a favor, shoot some comments below. Let me know your feelings about this, the debt ceiling, about the spending in the government, how that's affecting the housing market, making the inflation super sticky. We're looking at excess savings, unemployment. We're looking at all of these things. But today we're talking about the debt ceiling and how much we all want that to happen. Now, other than that, you guys, I really appreciate you following along with me. And if you're out there investing in real estate, I wish you luck and I hope you win.